So I was a big fan of the original 56% season 1, and when 56% season 2 came out, I was really excited because I wanted to see where they would take it. Because the first season was all about the process. Okay, so for those of you who aren't aware, what the 56% is about is in the future in some country, presumably Latin America. I'm not sure if it's supposed to imply the rest of the world has been destroyed or not, but there exist two classes of people. The 3% live on the offshore, and the 97% live on the inland. The inland is basically most of Latin America. It's a hellhole. It's people live in favelas. Those who work horrible. I don't even think they work factory jobs. I think the factories are all automated, but they work extremely poor, destitute jobs to help, and then the goods are sent to the offshore. The offshore is where the 3% who succeed in passing the process, which is a series of tests, kind of like the Hunger Games or any of the other ones. It seems like every young adult dystopian series has some variation of the process or test they have to get through. So on their 20th birthday, all the kids go and they get to go and take the process. And if they succeed in making it through all the tests and make it to the 3%, then they get to go to the offshore and live life of paradise. And the offshore is the upper class of society, so that's where the doctors, lawyers, mechanics, engineers, scientists, all kind of the white-collar intellectuals of society live. And they live in a paradise. Most things are automated. Technology is exceedingly advanced, and many of them just live lives of leisure. They don't even really have to work if they don't want to, but many will devote themselves, like I said, to higher pursuits. So the tests themselves are kind of weird because they test a lot of things. They do test things like IQ. They also test personality, ambition, problem solving, teamwork, a variety of different factors. And what's kind of confusing is some places in the process you're required to be kind of sociopathically self-centered, and some places in the process you're required to work together. So adaptability is extremely important. So those who pass the process, like I said, go to the offshore. The thing that's weird about it is when you pass the process, you go through a ritual in which they stab you in the shoulder with a needle, and the needle makes you infertile. It sterilizes you because they believe that merit has to be based on things you do, not who you are, which to me is the most like ass backwards way to run a meritocracy what possible, because what you're doing is it's basically dysgenic. You're taking the most intelligent, best looking, healthiest people in your society and ensuring they can't breed and pass their genes on. So you're basically ensuring that each generation is going to be worse than the one before. So it doesn't really make sense. What would make more sense is if people in the offshore could reproduce, but they would also take in new people who passed the test and became part of the 3%. However, they decided not to do this. So season 2 takes place in the aftermath of the process. So some of the characters like Michelle and Raphael managed to pass, but Joanna and Fernando failed to pass. They have to go back to their terrible lives on the inland, both of whom eventually join the cause. Now, we don't know about a ton about the cause, but the cause is basically, assumably, I'd say they're probably socialists, rebel movement whose goal is to end the process and to end the distinction between the offshore and the inland. Now, it's kind of an interesting question whether or not I support them as the viewer, given my political views. Because on one hand, I understand that if the offshore were to have open borders, it would immediately be destroyed. You'd have a bunch of low IQ, kind of savage people come in, and they would immediately overwhelm its limited resources and destroy it. It would be a disaster. On the other hand, the offshore has so many resources and so much technology like fusion power, like robots, like advanced medicine, that they could easily share with the inland and could vastly improve their lives. And this actually happens at the end of the season where they give them all kinds of like agricultural technology, electricity, etc. But I can understand the cause because the cause basically feels they have nothing to lose. The situation on the inland's bad and it's only going to get worse over time the longer the process goes on, as they have no resources to really repair anything. So it's just going to kind of continue to fall apart until they're eventually just living in huts and they can't even really afford favelas anymore. So, as the process isn't taking place during this season, we focus a lot more on the inland and a lot more on the offshore. On the inland, we see a lot about the cause. Now, the issue is we don't really know anything about the ideology of the cause. They don't really give us that much information on its background, how it was founded, etc. We know the old man was the founder of the cause, but we don't really know anything about him per se. We do see, however, they do place some sort of, how would you describe it, focus on working together, as they give Joanna a test to join the cause along with another girl, and she passes but the other girl fails, and so they both fail. Because, well, they both fail, so... Sorry, if one fails, they're about kind of working together as opposed to just being entirely about self-interest. We also see Raphael from the previous season, who was a very devout cause member, succeeds in passing and going to the offshore, where he's desperately trying to figure out a way to sabotage the process and end it, despite the fact that he falls in love with a girl there, and yeah, he falls in love with a girl there and joins the military. So as the season progresses, we get into what I like to call the M. Night Shyamalan season. Basically, for the first 5 or 6 episodes, every 5 minutes people change sides between the cause, between the inland, etc. You don't know whose side anybody's on. It turns on a dime. And it's kind of like, you know that thing M. Night Shyamalan from Robot Chicken. What a twist! That thing. Like Ezekiel, who's the head of the process, changes sides like 10 times this season. Fernando changes sides. Raphael, you don't know where he's going. Michelle is a complete space cadet that suffers from severe PTSD, and she switches sides like every 5 minutes. Basically, it's completely incomprehensible what's going on, and yet it's not done particularly poorly. Having such kind of a depth of motivations and kind of the whole sense of ambiguity and not knowing who to trust, and kind of the issues in being in deep cover, I think are actually dealt with pretty well. So it's kind of a pick your poison thing. It's, do you aim to try to simulate the feeling of being undercover, of not being sure who to trust, of having people not knowing really your motivations and the motivations of others, or do you try to make the story more coherent? And they went for the former here, and they largely succeeded. I just think it goes on a little too well, a little too long. And part 2 of the season is just very different from part 1, which I guess is not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be a little disorienting. So as we go through the season, we find out that the founding couple, the two who founded the offshore, were actually the founding trio who were in a menage a trois, because we just had to throw in some degeneracy to this. So it was a South American Dindu and 2 women. And of course, because we have to play to every kind of fantasy, I guess. So they founded the offshore on behalf of a group of wealthy investors on the inland. There's some kind of ecological disaster. I'm not sure if it's global warming. I'm not sure if it's a disease, if it's a crop failure, but they decide to withdraw to there. And they build it on, like I said, on behalf of wealthy investors. So as the world kind of starts to fall apart and the wealthy investors want to move there, the founding trio decide that they shouldn't just have this paradise for the wealthy. It should be for anyone with merit. However, one of them also wants to use the technology from the offshore to make the inland better, to give them fusion power, etc., and is against the idea of creating 2 humanities completely separate. However, because she doesn't agree with them, the other two kill her, and they become the founding couple, and her name is expunged from history. And they go on to deliberately sabotage the inland by overloading the various nuclear plants, etc., to destroy any ability of the wealthy investors to get there in time. They presumably die, or they get overwhelmed by riots or something. So they sabotage the inland, and that's part of why it's so bad and why things go bad so quickly. Because of, like I said, they sabotage it. The idea is to create a world that's completely bipolar, where you have people who live in, like I said, perfect wealth and comfort, and people who live in absolute squalor, and the difference is chosen by, in my view, a fairly arbitrary test. And this kind of fits in with the current globalist thinking. Because the current globalist thinking is culture doesn't matter, race doesn't matter, biology doesn't matter. Nothing matters except for an abstract notion of merit or something to that effect. It's because it comes from this left-wing belief that's been embraced by the center-right that all people are not only equal but interchangeable. That things like IQ distinctions don't exist. It's just entirely invented by people who are trying to exploit other people. So if all people are fundamentally equal, then all people have an equal opportunity. There aren't people who are naturally healthier. There aren't people who are naturally more intelligent. Everybody has an equal chance to pass the process. And so their system kind of makes sense because in their logic, and this is very much the logic of the modern world, the people who make it there are actually the only ones who are worthy of making it there. It is entirely on their own merit. It's not based on anything else. And the fact that other people don't make it there is their own fault, which is kind of a trend you see in modern conservatism and their view of the economy, where they'll say, if you're poor, it's because you're lazy. If you're poor, it's because you couldn't start a billion-dollar company. There's often a belief that everybody could start a billion-dollar company, and if you aren't able to do that, it's like I said, it's because you're lazy, it's because you're inept. It's entirely your fault for being poor. External factors don't really play any role in it. So their ideology makes sense, even if it is, like I said, pretty twisted. So as kind of the season goes on, they come up with a variety of plans to try to end the process. By the end of the season, it looks like they're going to end it. But Michelle, who's basically a plot device given human form, winds up stopping them from ending the process and holds the offshore hostage, only allowing them to continue the process provided they provide technology and seeds and stuff to the inland. Her dream is to create a place that's neither offshore nor inland. And I don't understand the point of it, if it's supposed to be like some equal, egalitarian paradise. If it's supposed to, I don't know, it's not really explained or explored, but she's going to do it. And regardless of how you feel about ending the process and destroying the offshore, because I think there's arguments on both sides within this, the fact that she double crosses them at the last minute, I think is really scummy. I think it's really obnoxious. And her character, like I said, just exists to be a plot device. So would I recommend season 2 of the 56%? Do I think it's worth watching? Yeah, I still think this is one of the best shows on Netflix. It is a little more thematically deep. The acting is pretty good. I understand it's dubbed over, so it's kind of weird to say the acting's good. But it was enjoyable. The characters are very well flushed out and defined. They do have very distinct personalities, and the interplay with them, like I said, is very well done. There is some issues, though, regarding, I guess, kind of maybe the lore isn't as well developed as it could be, and the constant kind of whiplash from the back and forth is also, can get a little obnoxious. But overall, I'd say both seasons of the 56% are well worth a watch, and it's one of the best shows on Netflix. How they're going to do a season 3, I don't know, because season 2 basically resolved everything, but I suppose we'll see soon enough. I hope you enjoyed the reaction review, guys, and more to come.